Hi everyone, thanks for joining in. Welcome to the third chapter of this AI Talk series. Today we are going to talk about how we scale AI in this changing landscape of customer services. To talk more, I will hand it over to Jeet Singh.
Thanks, Monica. Hello and welcome to AI Talks, a series of discussions amongst AI practitioners, hosted by AI practitioners and for AI practitioners. I am Jeet Singh, Global Business Head AI for Tech Mahindra, and I'm joined by Hasit Trivedi, CTO Digital Technologies and Global Head of AI. Our objective with these discussions is to get you perspectives from different parts of the ecosystem of the world of AI. And we're going to discuss nuances, issues, challenges, and pitfalls that may come along the way of getting to enterprise AI. And we want to get you some perspective on how to tackle them by people who've been there and done that. And our guest for today sits at a very unique vantage point to give us this perspective on AI. He's part of the financial services industry, which, as we all know, has been a pioneer and an evangelist of AI adoption. And he heads a business function which perhaps has the most number of practical and enterprise scale use cases for reimagining business processes. So please welcome Mr. KV Dipu, President and Head of Operations and Customer Service at Bajaj Allianz General Insurance Company. Welcome to the show, Dipu, and thank you for taking the time.
Thank you so much, Jeet, for such a warm introduction. Looking forward to a lovely chat.
Thank you. So, Deepu, as I said, you have this unique vantage point perspective of, by virtue of leading operations, communities, customer service at one of Asia's leading general insurance companies. Talk to us a little about how analytics and AI have not just disrupted your industry niche, but today, in fact, is a business moat and a source of distinct competitive advantage for you.
Yeah, thank you, Jeet. Let me just go back a little beyond COVID-19, because nowadays the entire discussion is around what happened during the pandemic and how are we emerging into the new normal. Obviously, none of us saw the pandemic coming, but we had embarked on a digital transformation journey way back in 2017. And I think when the pandemic happened, as one of my friends put it colorfully, it was a global unplanned UAT. And I think, we were able to pass the test with, flying colors, thanks to data, analytics and AI. And, while, all the, distinguished members, who were listening to us, know the ABC of AI and analytics, I think it's better to dwell on, a few use cases, and what have been, some of the dimensions, from a practitioner's perspective. So, for example, when our contact centers, shut down, and we had to service customers, right? Because we are an existing company who've been in business for 2 decades now, with, lots of customers. Our digital assets, immediately came to the core, and especially, our AI-driven chatbot. And I think we were able to differentiate ourselves, in a few ways. One is, while bots are passe, you see them in any industry. We didn't want, our customers to get a message saying, please terminate the chat, in case the bot cannot answer a query. So we leveraged not only AI, but we also had, assisted automation. So between a combination of, the bot and a human being, who kicks in case the bot is unable to answer, we were able to ensure, top-notch customer service. And by using NLP and AI, we were able to teach the bot over a period of time. And the bot increasingly, became, an expert, at first time query resolution. So which is how, we were able to ensure, that our customer service, continued completely uninterrupted, during this period. The other important aspect is, health insurance, right? I mean, if you crash your car, especially during the pandemic, we can always ask you to take your car to the garage, let's say, 1 week later. But when it comes to health insurance, you can't wait, right? So at that time, we leveraged, AI, for medical tests, especially when customers wanted to buy health insurance, and also, when they were, filing claims. So what used to happen was, customers who had to submit documents, they could submit them, electronically. And then we leveraged, telemedicine, by which, doctors would conduct, video-based, underwriting. And then based on that, we could issue policies, and we were also able to ensure that, our claims process, continued uninterrupted. And in fact, we won a global award for this, last year. And then, let's look at, motor insurance. Again, in motor insurance, earlier, if let's say you crashed your car, you had to wait for an inspector to come and examine the car, and the whole process would kick in. Today, thanks to AI and machine vision, it's just a two-step process at the customer's end. All he has to do is take photographs of the car and upload the images. Our AI engine kicks in, assesses the images, and conveys the amount to the customer in a matter of seconds. The customer gives his consent, the money is transferred. So just by by looking at these three use cases, right? Our AI-driven bot in customer service, our whole leveraging of AI in health insurance, and of course AI and machine vision in motor insurance. We were able to not just revolutionize customer experience, but actually ensure that we raise the bar and our customer service continued uninterrupted. And the proof of the pudding lies in what customers tell us. Independent market studies, through net promoter scores, show that we enjoy the highest scores in the marketplace, and by a significant distance over our competitors. And also, if you look at grievance ratios, which the regulator monitors companies on, we have been the player, with the lowest grievance ratios for quite a while.
Fantastic. Now, Hasit, coming to you, you've consulted for and implemented projects for a lot of BFSI clients across the globe. Do you want to add on to some of the examples that Dipu mentioned from elsewhere globally?
Sorry, I think one thing which we need to understand, that what is that capability of AI which is causing the disruption. Right? I think fundamentally it has four capabilities which machine has eyes, ears, by which it can see, it can listen, it can read, and it can understand. Correct. So and it can speak also. Correct. So for the audible kind of thing, Alexas or object detections, it provides a unlimited capability like human with the unlimited computing power. These combinations makes it disruptive technology, first of all. And while the most of the industries are using today from the efficiency perspective, but the real benefit of the AI is experience. Experience coming from the various facets. One facet is around the zero operations, zero ops, I would say, correct, which is about the zero latency business process. It is about zero error in business process. It is about zero disruption in business process and zero touch operations. Correct. So I think this combination of running the existing business operation in extremely efficient manner is something which translates into a unique experience to the consumer, and that's the benefit of AI from one spectrum, which is business as usual piece kind of thing. Other spectrum is that applying AI in areas where humans were finding it difficult to do. Correct, which is applying AI in a complex smart city projects or a healthcare system to disease diagnosis, or creating vaccines. If you see that vaccines are coming so fast in COVID scenario, I think a lot of credit goes to the AI, which is able to understand so much of data from diverse kind of mutants very fast. Or in banking, BFSI industry, frauds, analytics space, or cyber security space in a digital economy, that becomes very important. And some of this thing humanly not possible to process so much of data. So I think the key thing is to look at both the spectrum of the benefits. One is what provides you an edge over the business operations of existing business operation. Other thing is what you can do using technology, which you are not able to do so far. I think that is the core to it. Coming to BFSI industry, I think the customer servicing, investment advisory, fraud, compliance, algorithmic tradings, investment research, automated research on investment. So one of the banks which we worked across has an investment research division as a part of investment banking. And the first level research is for any given industry is created by the AI bots, correct? So AI figures out what is happening in the industry through the various filing company does, an industry place does it. Look at the various other conversations are happening. Research groups are, academics are doing these things, Stanford, the world. And all this thing is juxtaposed in a form of research document. And then human intervenes, provide its own expertise to create a industry research. So I think some of these things has reduced the cycle time of research very fast. And thus the quality of research has increased. So same goes to the pharma industry as well. The molecular research, biomedical science, disease diagnosis on X-rays or MRIs of the world. So I think whenever a company looks at the AI adoption, I think it has to parallel look at both the spectrum. One is the low end of the spectrum, which increases the efficiency, bring the experience element through zero ops, which I said. Other is something which human were not able to do so far today. Correct. So the providing infinite capability to humans by infusion of technology. So both needs a human in loop in picture, but one looks at the efficiency spectrum of the world, other looks at the infinite possibility of the world. Correct. So I think that is the key things which I think enterprise needs to keep in mind. And I think I heard Dipu, and I think they're beautifully utilizing both the spectrum. One is of course how to handle the volumes from the call center side, and thus bring the efficiency play. At the same time, on claims, which was humanly not possible so far to process the human claim in 24 hours. Now it's just possible using technology. Otherwise, somebody has to go to the site, take the photographs, the assessor has to do certain things, file the papers, and the expert will figure out what is the valuation of damage, and then it will do the things. Now, with the technology, it's just made simple, and it's a straight through, close to straight through, and it provides faster services to customers. So both one spectrum is that how I can reduce my customer servicing call, which is the efficiency play. Other is that how can I make a moat for the company, correct? Which you said, that how do I bring the differentiation in the industry, which on Dipu and his team is doing fantastically.
Absolutely. And like I said, from a matter of what would take days or even weeks to 20 to 30 minutes, from what I understand. And that's a fantastic achievement. So Dipu, you and your team can take a bow. Well done. Dipu, you spoke about, earlier in your example, talking about, the handoffs from a chatbot to a human. And I think that is a theme that I find very interesting, which is around the coexistence, collaboration, and indeed force multiplication of the digital workforce and the human workforce. Now, you've been advocating about the importance of humanizing digitized CX. Do you want to please share some examples and tips on how you folks have managed to deliver this humanized digitized CX?
Absolutely, Jeet. And see, I think the whole point is when we talk about customer experience, right? When do customers call you? Typically, customers don't call you when they're extremely happy, right? They don't call you to say, "No, I'm having a great day," and like calling you, right? They typically call you when they're going through a tough time, right? And they want, empathy and the healing touch. So, which is why, while the earlier accent was on digitizing the physical, today it has shifted to humanizing the digital. How do you bring in, the efficiency and the efficacy of bots? And I thought, Hasit covered that very well, when he was answering your query. At the same time, ensure that, you get these bots to mimic, human beings. So you get the best of, man and machine. So let me just, share, a few examples. So earlier when I spoke about, our chatbot, there I spoke about how the human being, takes over in case the bot is not able to answer a query, so that the customer gets an uninterrupted service at his end, right? He doesn't worry about who's answering the query as long as, the query is answered. But going forward, essentially what we're trying to say is he gets the efficiency of the bot, but with the human-like experience, right? So I'll give you, a few examples of how we have done that. So for example, if you look at, you've seen that standard WhatsApp joke, right? That earlier we moved from, using thumbprints because people were not literate, to now using again, your thumb, because it's the extreme form of literacy, right? So like that, some things come full circle. So for example, initially we used to have, like we said, call centers, and we used to have, human voice. Then we moved towards, bots, where it moved primarily towards text. And now you see voice coming back. But this is voice not of humans, but let's say voice of humanoids, right? Where you basically have, voice bots, now, trying to give a human-like experience. So, we've done a few pilots, and, the feedback has been extremely good. So when you have somebody, calling customers, for, let's say, taking feedback, or when you're talking about, some areas, across our entire customer servicing life cycle, we've been able to introduce voice bots. So here, we have had the best of both, because for the customer at the other end, on the one hand, it's quick and efficient. You don't have to worry about mood swings, for example, which come with human beings. But, it's a conversation, therefore you feel, comfortable. Now, what is very important here, and I'll take a cue from what, Hasit said, it's very important to make sure that, the customer doesn't feel frustrated. Because sometimes, when you try to convert art into a science, you typically get a response like, I'm not able to understand what you're saying, right? So which is why it's very important to pick the right use case, and get it right, because the bot needs to ensure, that the customer gets that experience. So I think in these 3-4 years that we have done, which is whether it is taking feedback, whether it is, registration of a claim, or whether it's some area that we picked across the entire life cycle, the feedback has been positive. And now, we plan to, scale it up. And the other is, I think we referred to that earlier on, that AI is ultimately a science, but customer centricity is an art, right? So you really have to blend the two, So whether it is artistic science or whether it is scientific art, the jury is still out, right? But I think the whole idea is, how do you ensure that across the entire life cycle, slowly and gradually, you bring in bots who are able to converse with customers, because that is what gives customers empathy and a healing touch. And while you take care of the low-hanging fruit, initially, eventually, how can you, get them to move up the value chain, so that tomorrow across the entire spectrum, you are able to bring in the best of both. You call a bot, you get human-like assistance, and you get quick service. And bots bring in other benefits as well, because they can work 24/7, right? Because they don't need to necessarily worry, right? And from a firm's perspective, there is no attrition, there are no mood swings, they will not ask for increments, right? So plenty of such benefits come in. So hopefully it can be a win-win-win, for the customer, the firm, and all the associated parties. This can really get scaled up in a big way.
Absolutely, and the digital workforce is something that we are all passionate about, and advising our clients on how to deal with the digital workforce. There are obviously pros and cons, and that's possibly, like you said, where the art element comes in. But Hasit, you've been involved in advising clients on the managing the digital workforce. And any inputs you want to share?
Yeah, I think with the proliferation of various kind of bots in enterprise ecosystem, I think it's very important we understand that how we manage it to scale it further. Till the time it's a few bots, I think there's no issue. But if more bots comes into picture, it needs some standardized way of managing them. Now, the term bot is typically connected to the RP and automation bots, but I think that it's a whole spectrum of digital workforce. It can be RPA bot, it can be chat bot, it can be voice bot, it can be ML bot. Fundamentally, this whole bot ecosystem has to be looked as a homogeneous collection of the workforce, which is a digital workforce. And for a human being, you have a human resource management system in a form of SAP or people of the world, where when somebody employee joins, you get an employee ID, you get a role, you define the responsibility, you define the KPI, you do the performance management, and based on performance, the promotion or termination or retirement happens over a period of time. So you manage a complete employee life cycle. I think similar systems are needed to manage these bots, because 5-year, 10-year down the line, number of digital bots workforce will be more than the human workforce which enterprise will have. And this will be just unmanageable. So you will have to have bot onboarding process where the bot gets identifier, which will be needed from auditability perspective as well. Correct. So ID is provided role. That means that what is the boundary conditions and boundary system which will touch. So it can't touch everywhere. So you need to have the roles defined for that bots. Access authorization mechanism has to be defined. Then you have to define the business KPIs on which, if it is an RPA, how many transactions it's processing. If it is chatbot, how many successful conversation it's fulfilling. If it is ML bot, how much is the accuracy of the forecasting or recommendation. Correct. So this KPI has to be defined. It has to monitor. It has to be ensured it's not getting degraded. It has to be ensured it is not introducing biases, or it not introducing any responsible AI aspect also has to be looked into. Correct. And then it's not that what you build is always straight true for perennially. Correct. It has to be terminated if its utility reduces or it is not useful anymore. Correct. So you need to have the mechanism to terminate bots as well, or retire the bots. So this whole life cycle, like a human life cycle, we need to have this system in place. Correct. I don't think that organizations are thinking around this in a big manner, because the typical structure is that, okay, bots, automation is different COEs, AI is different COEs, and data science is different COE, which is a part of analytics. But I think, as the manageability is becoming challenged, this is auto emerging as a need. But those who can think forward, I think this will be the good play to start, that you manage this digital workforce like a human workforce in an exactly similar replicated manner.
Yeah, that's a great concept. So now we will have, like we have HR, we will have DR. And while we'll deal with the life cycle of a digital workforce, like Dipu said, at least they don't have to deal with attrition and the great reshuffle that we are going through.
So that's where the CDOs are coming. So Chief Digital Officer versus Chief People Officer. Correct.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Okay. So Dipu, now coming to you, look, financial services as an industry and customer service as a domain is where a lot of the excitement is. But there is another vector that adds more complexity and challenges to you and your team's job. And you touched upon it briefly when you spoke about, bots. So you guys are designing, building, and running multilingual chatbots, voice bots, and mobile apps. in a country as linguistically diverse as India. What can all of us learn from that experience?
No, I think it's a very relevant question, Jeet. I think one thing which we all need to take cognizance of, especially in a country like ours, is it's very important to go where the customer is, right? That's the whole paradigm of customer experience, right? Now, what happens when you are today in not just a digital way of working, but a digital way of living is most digital assets by default, tend to be in English because, it's the language that typically we've used in the area of automation, right? Whereas when you want to, speak to customers and when you want to interact with them, you need to ensure that, you talk to them in their language, like I said. And I remember one thing, which a customer had told me many years ago, when I had met him, and he was generally speaking, not about my firm, but generally speaking about, the overall industry. And he said, please ensure that if you hook me through my language, it's not just the application form or a call center person who speaks my language, but end to end, it's in my language, right? It has to be end to end, in my language. That's a very important, but, very subtle point, but very important one. So what we did was, for example, when we came out of the AI-driven chatbot, like I mentioned, to amplify our reach, we launched it in languages even other than English. So that clearly, helped, our customers, right? The other thing, for example, you take WhatsApp, right? You'll see, for example, if let's say, you're writing to somebody, who's not conversant in English, a lot of people end up, writing it in text, right? Like if you found write in Hindi, write it in text.
Transcribing it, yeah.
Yeah, but I'm saying, you can just record a message and send, right? But many people don't just pick it by default. Right? That's because of, that's because of the force of habit, right? So, which is why, what we realized is, to overcome this, we need to ensure that, like I said, we are there where the customers are. So I'll give you one example which has worked very well for us, because you said what expenses can people pick up. So in insurance, we offer multiple products: car insurance, home insurance, health insurance, crop insurance. Crop insurance is for farmers, and that's typically, people who are in the rural parts of India. And if you see rural parts of India, they're typically characterized by asymmetry of information. You don't really have, organized marketplaces. So we said, why don't we help them? So we came out with an industry-first app specifically for farmers, and we called it Farm Mitra, and launched it exclusively in Indian languages, not in English. So being an industry, being an insurance industry app, for starters, they could interact with us, file a claim, ask for some status, so on and so forth. Then we also realized that they interact with the government a big deal. So we gave them access to the government portal through the app. So in a way, it became a bit of a one-stop shop. Then we said, let's add some features. Soil and weather play a big role in agriculture. We gave them, info on weather. Then we gave them, information on pricing. During the lockdown, right? Prices kept varying wildly. Then we gave them, crop advisories, so on and so forth. And when COVID happened, this became a lifeline for them. Without stepping out of their home, using this app, they could interact with us, with the government and the ecosystem at large. Word of mouth, downloads went up. Even on the Google Play Store, at one point of time, we had a rating of 4.6. And this was a unanimous choice for, EFMA Accenture Global Innovation and Insurance Award last year. And, it's really, helped us, stand the test of time. And today it's become a model for us, right? Through an app, we service it. So I think, that's clearly a, classic example of how you can leverage, multilingual and digital and ensure that, you're able to succeed at scale.
Fantastic. And now, Hasit, conversational AI, I know, is close to your heart as well. And you're passionate about, like we say, solving the layers or peeling off the layers of complexity as you get to full conversational AI. What are your views on multilingual conversational AI from your experience?
I think let me talk about this conversational AI a little bit more, because I think the earlier Dipu said that we are going back to the age-old of way of doing certain things in certain scenarios. This is also an area, correct? If you see the human evolution, the script came pretty late. Humans were still doing conversations. So I think there was some hundreds and thousands of years after which human evolution came, and then after that, somewhere in Egypt or the script writing came into picture. And there's a debate whether it got started in Arab or Egypt. That I don't want to get it there. But the fundamentally natural way of human way of interaction was voice only. And now we're again moving towards potentially voice becoming a universal UI for conversation with the machine. Right? I think the typing, as Dipu said, that people still type on certain things, and in general, typing has to disappear eventually, unless there is a needed for regulatory perspective. Otherwise, there is no reason you and me to need to talk through emails, writing, or write a lot of documents, when everything can be recorded. The storage on cloud is accessible. You can always do the transcription. So that typically there's no need of conversation, doing the conversation on writing. Now, if the universal UI is a conversation AI is a universal UI for anything, and voice being the key channel of communication, one thing we need to realize that it will lead to the having a pretty important role of a conversation in an enterprise ecosystem. Today, it's used primarily for customer servicing space, but this will become eventually a channel, a customer engagement channel where the promotion to the commerce to the servicing, everything will be managed. Because the promotion today happens on a different channels. Okay, it happens on a physical channel, it happens on your website, it happens on a mobile app. But I think when the engagement touch point is a conversation AI bot, then you will have to have the mechanism to push the promotion, get the various information from the customers, do actual commerce, which has started happening. Various kind of commerce has started happening from this thing, and eventually customer services. So we are starting in reverse order today. So we have started as an adoption, customer servicing has started, then commerce is starting, and potentially promotion will come a little late. But if you are designing it correctly, I think you have to design for all three elements, which you do for any other channel. So your website is a channel. So tomorrow you have to see the conversation AI bot is a channel. And that business design of treating it as a channel will provide a moat, provide a different kind of experience, and keeping in mind it can be voice is a primary channel. Now, with the technology, as it adopts, that language will become less and less relevant, because people would be able to converse with the bot in any language. And the AI will do the needful. Even if the recipient agent is not a same language, this thing. Today, there is a constraint. The two parties has to be speaking the same language. With the technology, you will have the situation where the speaker is in different language and listener is listening in different language. Correct? All the interpretation and transcription is done by the technology. Of course, there is the issues. It is still a large volume of text, a large volume of the voice in a long paragraph manner. So it can't do it correctly. But it's just a matter of time. It's not that it's within the realm of possibilities. So I think the language issue is important, and more if you see, the local language communication globally will happen. Today, humans are getting constrained by the recipient language competency, and thus there's a monolithic language has been used across the globe. Correct? I think that again will be going back to history, where the natural way of communication will come into picture, which is voice, your own language, and doing everything through voice, promotion, commerce, as well as.
So, as we draw to a close, I'll pick on something you mentioned earlier, and you said that, part of the art is also around picking the right use cases. Now, I want to come to you and lean on your experience on some of the best practices on prioritizing the AI use cases, and also your advice on handling resistance to changes in the existing business processes that may come from the teams.
This is for me, right?
Yes, for you, Dipu.
Yeah, okay. Thank you, Jeet. Yeah. So I think you asked about how do you prioritize use cases and how do you overcome, internal challenges. Right?
Yeah,
Broadly,
change management. Yeah.
I'll come to change management, then I'll come to prioritizing. I think change management is at one level extremely simple. Okay, it's only about executing it. And this I learned in Lean Six Sigma. I worked in GE for 20 years before joining Bajaj Allianz, and that's something I've internalized, which is about ensuring that you do your stakeholder management right up front. All the heavy lifting has to happen on day one, because sometimes what happens is teams for fear of rejection or for fear of objection, they work in a small user group, and then maybe just a few days before launch they catch hold of this poor unsuspecting stakeholder and then tell him we're going to go to the market. Then they figure out objections, and then the compromises, and that's when the product does not really hit the market. I think if you involve people right up front, and of course categorize them, Six Sigma teaches you that who are the promoters, who are the likely detractors, how can you overcome objections, and then get everybody on board. Then you find the team works cohesively, and therefore you're able to take it forward. The other important aspect there, Jeet, is also to ensure that when we are embarking on any journey, it's not about standing up and saying that I feel we should do this, or you feel this is important. It's about basically looking at data. What is data telling us? And secondly, what are customers telling us? See, the moment it becomes objective enough to say this is what data tells us, this is what customers are telling us, and then you involve stakeholders right up front, it just becomes an unbeatable formula. So that's one clear way in which one can do change management. Now coming to prioritizing AI use cases, I think it's basically a variant on what we all have heard about the urgent and important metrics, right? About how you focus on what's important but not urgent if it's planned work, and of course urgent and important gets priority. So do the effort impact metrics. What is of course maybe low on effort but high on impact. Pick that first, and then you pick on high impact and high effort. Low impact is something which you can obviously not need to do. And when you do that, then you're able to prioritize. Now, where does this come from? This again comes from data and customer, because there are two things broadly which you look at. One is if you look at the areas where there are maximum friction which customers face, but which nobody has solved, and if you can be the first one to solve it, that's when you are able to be first to market. Others, you end up becoming a me too. So I think as long as you have your ear to the ground, figure out what your process tells you, what your customers tell you, do the effort impact metrics, get stakeholders involved right up front, and follow this method in a very methodical manner. Then you not only pick the right use case, but you also make sure that you're effective when you launch it in the marketplace.
Fantastic. I mean, you make it sound so easy. I wish it was, but yeah, I mean, it's a good framework and a good mental model as advice for all our viewers. Well, I think that's all we have time for today. But I think the highlight for me has definitely been AI as a science, customer centricity as an art, and blending it together is what makes companies like Bajaj Allianz a market leader. So Dipu, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your experiences. It was a pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Jeet, and thanks to Hasit as well. Really enjoyed listening to Hasit and Jeet. You were an awesome comp here. So thanks to both of you. It was a lovely conversation.
Thanks for your time.